Well, good afternoon. What a privilege to have you here today. And I note that we have quite an intimate audience so that we can unpack all the things that are critical about the built environment and translate some of the broad constructs that we've been discussing over the last couple of days into an area that's very close to my heart. I'm Davina Rooney, the Chief Executive Officer of the Green Building Council of Australia. And today we're going to be joined by global and Australian experts as we start to unpack what this means in the built environment sector. So I'm going to start with a bit of a contextual opening. We're joined, by Martin Pauli, who's the Global Lead Circular Economy Services from Arup, and Dr. Carolina, who's from the World Green Building Council and one of my colleagues from the Clean Energy Finance Corp. So what I'm going to do is give a little bit of an overview of the concept, and then we're going to unpack some of the principles. There's going to be an opportunity, if there's areas that you're really excited about, if you actually open the audience engagement part of the app and go into the chat, we can absolutely take your questions and ask them to some of our experts later in the session. So when we actually start to look at circularity and the built environment, it's a privilege to be here from the Green Building Council of Australia. We're one of the 77 green building councils in the global network, and I'm privileged to be on the board of the World Green Building Council. Some of the Australian context is we're 20 years young. We've been working in the critical areas of climate and partnering with government to enact change. Some of the things that are exciting is how we take that thought and leadership and then try to fast track that into the circularity space that so many contextualise is bringing together all of the sustainability megatrends. Now, we've been hearing, the global statistics about the decline of circularity, and you see that clearly in the built environment. So I've heard through this conference a few people reference that we have 10% of emissions in materials and construction alone, 50% of the waste, and this is, 7%, this key global circularity stat that we're looking. When we translate that to Australia, we've zeroed in on some of the focus areas. 30% of commercial building waste churn, that's 30% of overall construction waste. So we've zeroed in on that as a particular area of focus. The thing that we say is when people move houses, they don't take everything, throw it out and buy it new, but that is fundamentally what happens in many office fit-outs around the globe. And that is a really critical focus for us to look at how we do that differently and really focus on that area. Within the construction and waste, 76% is recycled. With the partners that we work in through our programs, that's over 90%. So what that shows is there's a huge opportunity to lean in the built environment sector and actually change these actions. And so some of this session is to unpack some of the practical ways, and some of my colleagues from the World Green Building Council are going to look at how we actually do that from a global scale and take some of the principles that we've heard elsewhere in the conference and bring them into sharp action in our built environment sector. So as we've been hearing across the conference, there's large amounts of reviews in the circular economy in the built environment space. We've heard that globally. We also see that in almost every jurisdiction. So we see that in Australia. And in a similar way that we've been hearing throughout the conference days, we've been partnering with policymakers to bring those into action. So for example, in my home state of New South Wales in Australia, embodied carbon measurement in all building types is mandated, whether it's homes, large buildings, or whether it's even in infrastructure, and looking at ratcheting targets in those spaces. So one of the things, when people look at these projects and programs, people would love to see some of the things that are happening already, some of the sources of inspiration. So, one of my favourite projects, substation number 164, a very glamorous name for a building, is two old buildings that were actually above a substation, and they were stitched together for a new high-rise. And how that was done was actually just by removing part of the facade, joining the two buildings, and then, doing an enhancement on one side to celebrate them as a different structure. The second exemplar is a high school that's from an old disused university site. that was then partnered and repurposed with a different part of government to actually take that and re-life that as a project. And so some of these, we'll hear these concepts across the different areas, but I mentioned fit outs. Down there at number 6 is a particular source of inspiration for me, Country Roads fit out. And what you'll see is all the stands there are actually made from off-cut fabrics from their warehouses. They've actually used recycled yogurt containers and had those custom made into the fittings that the models are standing on. And one of their partnerships for their hooks is taking a collaboration with a community group that finds ocean plastic and makes them into jewellery. They commissioned them to make the hooks in their stores, and then they've been progressively changing their line of clothing to incorporate a lot more recycled content in them, doing take-back schemes. So this is what's exciting when, Churchill said, we design our buildings, and then they design our lives. This is a paraphrasing. When we actually take these constructs into the built form, it redefines what we do. Just noting that we've been working on practical guides of upfront carbon reductions, looking at embodied carbon. An enormous challenge that we're seeing is there's an enormous, this is free to download. I can see some people interested and engaged. If any jurisdictions are interested, we've given away the IP for this and I'm very happy to partner with other jurisdictions, because a massive problem that we have is that the same standards are being done differently everywhere. And what it's causing is a substantial gamification where materials partners find the best database to get the best answer rather than actually necessarily redesigning their product. Now, we have to care because measurement matters, and in this critical decade, we need to drive as much transformation as possible. And so the roles of not-for-profits like the Green Building Council is to partner and drive transformation. So I'm very happy to catch up at the end, or for our wonderful online audience, happy to engage on LinkedIn if there's things that we can do to help you on your journey. In this one, we partnered with the government and then have gifted IP to different infrastructure areas, because we've got to be really focused that all the way across the built economy, from houses to large buildings to cities and the critical infrastructure that wraps around them, we use the same concrete. We use the same materials. We really need to work as one built environment and drive this transformation rather than having unique sections and series across them. And so a huge focus for us is moving towards zero embodied carbon. And so this is part of our national advocacy that we're currently driving with policymakers. But an enormous focus is working with other green building councils to more aligned methodologies. I noted that fit outs is right at the heartbeat of our focus. And so something we're currently in consultation at the moment is a new category on circularity. And so I am going to be very inspired and taking notes with some of Arup's new circularity indicators, some of the World Green Building Councils that are being presented, because we need to take these and, people are saying about measurement that needs to be in the future. Measurement needs to start yesterday. Would have been really great if we did this 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Right now. And so we're going to be embedding this in standards and very happy to share the concepts. Now, why are we incredibly focused on this? Because it's, a key part of the Australian built environment emissions. It's a key part of the waste we generate. And we also spend enough time in them to impact on our health. In a post-pandemic world, fit outs need to earn the commute because there's an option of working remotely. So we think that this is right at the intersection of impact and opportunity. And so a key focus area for us to work on, because it is one of the most wasteful areas in our built environment practice. I'm going to close with an opportunity that all of us need to think about, which is how do we work together on public projects and take our ambitions to scale. So I'll note for the Green Building Council of Australia, we're partnering with the Brisbane Olympics for 2032. Our role will be their certification partner. And yes, they've actually committed to carbon neutrality, which is a focus that we'll be working on with them. But the real opportunity is how do we take as much circularity as possible? I've already been absolutely inspired by some of the things that I've seen at this conference. How do we take down at the expo some of the great drink containers where people actually pay a deposit and get their funds back before they return? How do we take solutions that are temporary and absolutely embed them? So, and then for us who work on key leading, signature projects like this, how do we actually take that into a generation of social infrastructure? When we work with our partners in government, their procurement is such a powerful policy lever, but the opportunity is to take it beyond signature projects and take those as constructs across all projects and programs. So that is the purpose of today's session. And so we're going to be talking about how do we take all those big picture constructs and how do we absolutely embed them. So I'm delighted to invite our next speaker, Martin Pauli, and think of your questions for Martin and get them in the app because we're going to have a question time with him afterwards. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Martin, and over to you.
Thanks, Davina, and welcome, everyone. You could see already from the introduction that Davina just gave that there's a or that there are synergies across the climate crisis, the carbon crisis, and the circular economy. And this will also be pretty much of a red line throughout my presentation. I'll leave that slide on screen for 2-3 seconds, just for you to digest that a bit. I think it explains a bit the problem and a bit of the dilemma that we're in. For decades, there has been a massive focus on the operational energy and efficiency of buildings. So we as designers and architects and engineers have been trained to optimize that. But unfortunately, we forgot all the energy that is embodied into the materials. And I think this is also explained here. At the moment, we believe that when we talk about green buildings and sustainable buildings, they are not causing ecological losses, but indeed they are. So what we call green and best practice at the moment is probably not where we could be. So there's a long way ahead of us. And this is a massive responsibility and at the same time opportunity for us. And we believe that the principles of circularity can actually help us getting there to a more restorative and regenerative design of the built environment, which is actually causing ecological gains. Now, to put that a bit into context, and also the carbon problem that we just described, in May last year, the Science Based Targets Initiative published their take on upfront embodied carbon and a pathway towards 2050. So how does that pathway look like, and what are the targets to be actually consistent with the 1.5 degree target? And you see that all those pathways go down to 0, and they looked at it for different building typologies: residential, office, retail, and others. And looking at that, in 2030, a regular office building would need to have 330 CO2 equivalents per square meter. And if we put that into context, just to express the size of the problem that we are facing and the size of the challenge, the building that you see here, which is actually based in Copenhagen, was designed in 2020 with 880 kgs. And Denmark is usually a country that is known for sustainability and sustainable design practices. You see that there's a massive gap. In 2040, to be consistent with the 1.5 degree target, we would need to move to 110 kgs. So you can see how massive the challenge is that is ahead of us, and how, to some extent, how far we are away from designing truly sustainable buildings that are consistent with our targets. And 2040 is literally just around the corner. Now, how can we close that gap? Basically, and this is obviously simplifying things a bit, but we need to reduce complexity here and there. We can use less materials. That's one option. We can use materials more efficiently, which is also a principle of the circular economy. At the same time, if we could use less materials in the designs, my feeling tells me we would already do it because we would also save significant costs. So there are limitations to using less materials. We can definitely substitute materials, for sure. We can use nature-based and renewable materials. At the same time, we will hardly substitute traditional construction materials for elevator shafts, to some extent for foundations for the building structure, for glass facades, for building services. So I think what is clear is that there are many building systems and layers that will also in the future rely on traditional materials. So this is the battle that we need to fight. We need to help hard-to-abate industries, cement, steel, aluminium, glass, to decarbonize significantly. What we can do is we can circulate materials. For us at Arup, and I think this is also common sense outside of our bubble, circulating materials has become not the one and only, but quite a significant practical solution to decarbonize. So we are not only circulating materials for the sake of the circular economy, we use it as a practical mean to achieve our targets. And I think this is one of the punchlines that I want to get across. And to put this into context, there's a 3-minute video.
The world has woken up to the climate crisis, the effects of which are already being felt. One of the largest contributors is the built environment. To realise a net zero and nature-positive future, the building industry needs to reduce the impact its demand for products and materials is having on the planet. The circular economy is critical to achieving net zero, as well as reducing the use of virgin materials, capturing long-term value, increasing resilience, reducing waste, and creating new economic opportunities. So, how can we realise the benefits that the circular economy has to offer? A framework built around 4 principles is designed to help the building industry tackle global challenges at every stage of a project's lifespan. Build only what you need. Do we need a brand new building? Instead, we can reuse, adapt, or transform existing buildings to meet future needs. Quay Quarter Tower in Sydney was built around an existing core, retaining 68% of the original structure, reducing the requirement for new materials, which saved 12,000 tonnes of carbon and $130 million. Build with the right materials. When we do build, we should use renewable, bio-based materials, or those with a lower embodied carbon. We should track and set targets around material use, collecting data through material passports, which allow them to be recovered and reused in the future. Build efficiently. There are opportunities to save carbon and cut waste with every decision, no matter how small. Designers for One Triton Square in London adopted a marginal gains approach, analysing every system and component to maximise performance, resulting in a saving of 40,000 tonnes of carbon and a 43% reduction in costs. Build for long-term value. Buildings don't last forever, but their parts can be reused. Brummen Town Hall in the Netherlands was designed to be dismantled after 20 years. Selecting prefabricated timber components and avoiding difficult-to-recycle materials allowed for 90% of the original building to be reused, turning it into a material bank for the construction of future buildings. The building industry needs to adopt a circular mindset across the entire project lifespan. Through strong leadership, collaboration, innovative circular business models, and digital technology, we can transform the industry and achieve a net zero and nature-positive future. Search for the Circular Buildings Toolkit.
Fantastic video, isn't it? I couldn't explain the principles better, but let's maybe dive into some of those case studies. So this, and Davina already featured that in her presentation. The world's first upcycled skyscraper. We didn't invent that title, it was CNN. A project done by 3XN architects together with Arup. And it's not about I'm not going to go into the details of the design. I just wanted to tell about some of the indicators that are relevant. Obviously, all the design principles, the impact has been measured. And what you could also see from the video is ultimately we will need to translate our design choices into carbon, into cost, into time, of course, and into money. So we will need to be able to articulate the value that those design principles can unlock in the future. Because this is what also will convince investors, developers, and every stakeholder that is involved into those design decisions. Now, 200% increase of lettable floor area, while only 30% of the core area has been added. It's a bit of a nerdy KPI, but for those of you that are engaged into architecture and design, this is quite substantial. And 200% increase of lettable floor area is a massive value lever. 120 square meters more per floor due to the vertical transport concept. Now one could argue what's the relation to circularity, and I take your point. Still, ultimately, we are not thriving for perfection. We need to adopt principles, and this all needs to be embedded into one coherent and meaningful piece of design and concept. 98% of the original structure was retained. 65% of floor plates have been retained. So it's basically following one of the first principles of do nothing, take what you have, and do the best out of it. And ultimately, and we've seen that 12,000 tons of carbon have been saved by just thinking it through, adopting the principles, and then articulating also the value in carbon and in money. One Triton Square, another project which was also featured in the video, where there was a decision as to what would happen with the facade. And the initial idea was to deconstruct the facade and build anew. There were various limitations, so the designers and the involved industry players decided to refurbish the facade on site and then install it again. And again, massive carbon savings, massive cost savings, and also waste savings. So I think these are the principles, again, where someone took a bit of a risk. This could also have ended up being a nightmare, but luckily it didn't. So adopting CE principles, let's be honest and straight, is about taking risks. People have to have the courage to think that through, and then also follow things up and really take things to reality. And I think yeah, this is what's needed, and I think that was also a bit of a red line in other sessions that we saw earlier today. We have to think outside of the box, have the courage, and also take risks. Now, if you want to learn more about case studies, check the toolkit that was also featured in the video. It's free to access for everyone, free to use. You will see case studies, you will see principles, you can filter those principles per building layer. So it's a fantastic resource that is openly available to anyone. Short summary, whole life carbon, so operational and embodied carbon, is imminent. It will come. First countries have imposed certain targets already, which is putting pressure, positive pressure, and which is also creating a dynamic when it comes to circularity. Second, if the industry and we all won't move, policymakers sooner or later will mandate it. That's for sure. So we better move fast. 3, adopting circularity principles for us is a very practical mean to decarbonize the construction, the project, but more importantly, the entire supply chain. Massive CO2 problems are related to scope 3 emissions that are in the supply and value chain. So we need to work hard to decarbonize the entire system. And what you can see from the presentations, we have pilot projects, we have references, demonstrators, they are all over the place now, which is good, a very positive sign. And we also see a lot of innovation when it comes to business models. So the industry is picking up, the demand side is picking up, policymakers are there. So it's actually a perfect storm that we need to use. And with that, I hand over to...
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this after-lunch session, which is not always the best time, but thank you very much. It means that you are committed with our work. And thank you, Davina. Thank you, Martin, for the invitation. My name is Carolina Montano Owen, and I am the technical lead of sustainable buildings at the World Green Building Council. So there we go. So the World Green Building Council is the largest global, regional, local network of action in the built environment. We represent over 75 green building councils around the world. We represent businesses, organizations, but also governments that are working towards achieving the ambitious climate goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN SDGs. So why the circular economy? I think the circular economy in the built environment has been used for years. As the circular economy is an optimization function, it has made the business case for our projects, but it has helped us or given us the tools to optimize our resources. But I want to here show a couple of statistics from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and these show us that the current efforts for decarbonize the built environment are currently focusing on energy efficiency and energy renewables, which is key, but this is tackling only 55% of the carbon emissions. To address the other 45%, we need the circular economy. We need to be smarter about the way we use our products in our buildings. And the second reason, and I'm glad you have seen this graph throughout the forum, we are closing the planetary boundaries. So we are not only crossing them, but we are actually performing even worse. Now we're crossing 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. And if we think about the circular economy as an optimization function, our planetary boundaries are the boundary conditions, and we are crossing them, which means that we are using more resources than what we have. And what that means is that we are using the resources of the future. So the circular economy actually makes sense. It just doesn't make sense to have the traditional linear approach where we develop waste and use and waste. So we need to keep materials and buildings in a cycle. So at the World Green Building Council and its network, we found that it was the right time to put all the different frameworks, definitions, strategies in a single place, and that's why we developed the Circular Built Environment Playbook, which is a resource that you can find in our website and use for the conversations with all your stakeholders. You will see this graph where we analyze different resources, different frameworks, and we found some common principles that you have seen throughout the presentations. So the circular economy in the built environment is about making resources more efficient. It's about optimizing materials, it's about minimizing raw materials, but it's also about optimizing the use of buildings. And what that means is optimizing the lifespan, but also design flexible buildings, design for disassembly and design for different uses. And last but not least, there is a very important principle, is about the regeneration of nature. So you can see in the Circular Environment Playbook this graph where you can see the different strategies being used across the life cycle of a building, so I invite you to use it. We also have a checklist that you can use to engage with different stakeholders, from users, policymakers, students. But since I have some time, I want to bring your attention to the moment we are now. And to give you some background, I want to talk about COP. So in COP26, a couple of years ago, there was the launch of the Breakthrough Agenda. And this is basically an initiative that is calling for the sectors with the highest emissions to make more commitments and to actually show what are the decarbonization paths. So last year, for the first time during COP28, the governments from France and Morocco took the lead to talk about the buildings breakthrough. And several organizations are looking into that, what will look like and what are the commitments that the sector can do. And I want to bring your attention here to the work of the Global ABC and the AIA that is looking into the decarbonization path. So the Global ABC put forward 10 recommendations of whole life carbon. But there are 3 on circularity, and you can see here. And you can see how the summary is actually aligning with what Martin was saying, what the sector has been doing. So there is a focus on prioritized retrofitting, so analyzing whether we really need new buildings, and there is a call here to analyze the policies and the guidelines, to analyze what has been done, but if they need to be updated or if we need to come up with different type of policies. There is a big call for strengthening data, and of course looking into economic incentives. In terms of material circularity, similar to what we have seen throughout the forum, there is a call for more transparency and accessibility of data. Without the data, we cannot measure what we have done and what we need to do in the future. And in terms of circularity, again, we need to decide and have better planning for our buildings, but also our cities. So I just want to finalize with this. So how are we supporting these groups? Well, we have all these resources. We do the research, and we are supporting the working groups of the Global ABC and the EIA to shape the Buildings Through agenda that we're going to see during the next COPs. We have industry guides, we have position papers, we have thought leadership, but we also have roadmaps and specific solutions. And here I want to talk about the Buildings Circular Coalition, where we are deploying specific solutions. We have an accelerator tomorrow that I invite you to look at those blueprint projects, and also Building Live, which is the program that is supporting decarbonization roadmaps at regional and local levels. So yes, thank you very much for joining me, and back to Davina.
Thank you so much, and what a wonderful overview. So I can see some people taking opportunities to ask questions on the chat, because both Martin and Carolina will come back. Now I can see lots of our wonderful audience members taking photos. The wonderful thing about the World Green Building Council guides is that they're all available for download. So you can consider those as being absolutely available to you. Now, we're going to change feet, and we're going to welcome a virtual panellist, Michael de Russo, who is a director, or the head of property from the Clean Energy Finance Corporation in Australia. So for context, they're like Australia's government bank who's helping to drive the action in this space. First, I should say welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Davina. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's such a privilege. We decided to halve our global footprint for this session by having Michael dial in for the session. Now, throughout the conference, there's been a lot of discussion about the role of finance, but we're going to bring this to the built environment and say, why is finance in the built environment really considering the circularity aspects?
It's a really good question, Davina. I think for context here in Australia, we recognise that circular economy solutions are needed to address our decarbonisation efforts in hard-to-abate sectors. A full transition to renewable energy will not be enough to meet Australia's climate targets or achieve our net zero 2050 target. So I think that's really important context on the role of circularity. So from a finance perspective, there's probably a few aspects on why financiers and the capital market are taking circularity on board. I think the first key one is sustainability and climate change mitigation, which essentially is a risk measure, which is really important in the finance space. And as we know, and as it was touched on before, we know the scale of the problem that we're facing. So that creates a big risk. And I think financing the market to transition from its current consumption and production patterns to more sustainable circular approaches can assist in mitigating exposure to a lot of this risk. So that's, I think, a key function the finance market is looking at. The other is the economic opportunity. So there's been a couple of reports here in Australia that KPMG delivered a report a few years ago now, noting that the adoption of circular economy in just across the food, built environment and transport sectors in Australia alone is estimated to add more than $210 billion to our GDP by 2048. So there's a significant thematic there to support from a financing perspective. And I think the last key factor is regulation. So here in Australia, with all the governments at all levels, state, local and federal, have signed up to a joint national plan to increase waste recovery and recycling rates. So the finance sector can, by investing in circularity projects and encouraging innovation, stay ahead of that changing regulatory landscape, which is another important proactive measure.
Fantastic. And so what are some of the steps that the Clean Energy Finance Corporation has been using within their finance to drive change in this area?
It's a whole of market approach. As you touched on before, Davina, CFC is Australia's Green Bank. We're a $30 billion organisation that is there to invest across the economy to drive industry, government outcomes and objectives. So for us to drive circularity in the marketplace, I think we have to recognise that it's going to come from both the supply side and the demand side. So on the supply side, it's looking at supporting recycling facilities that support more circular products. And on the demand side, it's looking at building up demand in the market for circular products via the use of increased recycled materials. So we've seen that in a lot of the projects that we've funded, which I'll touch on in a little bit, but they've already sort of been highlighted, I think, on a couple of the earlier presentations.
Well, I love that. So Michael and I normally come across in deals. How do we get this deal done to make this fabulous project happen? Can you give a hint of some of the deals you've done? And I know you've been working with both the built form and other parts of the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to recognise is our investment function at the organisation is really to drive strong demonstration value for the broader market, because this is about showing what's commercially viable and what's an optimised way to deliver set outcomes. So that's where a lot of our investment activity comes from. When we're looking at seeking new opportunities to cover a cross-section of decarbonisation themes, when we're thinking about circularity, it's about looking at the subset of all those elements that make up circularity and piece them together as a sum of all parts solution. So if I look on the demand side, Keek Water Tower was, I think, mentioned by Martin just before. We're an investor in that fund, but great example of a retention of existing asset and adaptive reuse. Yes, there's a massive commercial upside from that in terms of saving on construction timelines and project value, but ultimately also a very big embodied carbon saving. So a very good example of retaining that existing structure. On the supply side, we've recently finished a financing of a recycling plant here in Brisbane, Queensland. So it's quite a revolutionary product. It's a fully integrated facility that transforms construction, demolition and excavation waste into high quality resources, including sand, fill, road base and aggregate materials. Once it's fully operational, it can process, I think it's about 500 tonnes of waste every hour, so about 1.5 million tonnes per year, which is a massive facility and a first of its kind, and I think it's the largest in the world, or definitely the Southern Hemisphere. So having a facility like that can recover over 90% of the waste is probably an unprecedented standard in the realm of recycling materials, and I think a really important step change in the Australian context and working with buildings. And the last one I'll touch on, which is really looking at engineered timber. So we're looking a lot of different materials that help reduce upfront carbon, but I think the role that building with timber can play in the market is introducing construction processes or changes to construction processes and thinking about promoting reuse and recoverability, especially when the construction process of engineered timber is very much a bit of a Meccano set, which promotes the deconstruction on the back end versus our traditional construction processes.
Fantastic. And the best thing that we have, Michael, about having a global audience and who are online as well as in the room is we're going to get some global fact checking on whether it's just the largest in the Southern Hemisphere or the largest in the world, I'm sure, in the Q&A afterwards. So that'll be fantastic. Now, where do you see the market moving in this area in the future? Where are we going?
Where are we going? It's a massive field and it's a massive problem we're looking to solve. I think due to its breadth of the circularity concept, I think we see the best opportunity to drive circular economy investment is where there's synergistic outcomes across all the sectors. So as I said, we're playing on the supply and demand side. I think the true demonstration projects that really present good value to the market are ones that show that win-win of the value transition across all counterparties in the marketplace. So I feel there's going to be more complementary projects, not just individual focus areas on circularity or recycling, but they're actually going to be complementary across other sectors. Technology is another one that we're seeing playing a really important role, especially to assist in closing that loop in the construction space, providing a digitised solution for mapping materials. So that's another big focus area we're seeing emerge. incorporating more circularity into the measurement and verification frameworks. I think that firstly standardizes measurement, which I know you touched on earlier, but also rewards our performance, which has been a big part of what's driven the Australian market is as having that standardized baseline approach to actually be able to determine who's doing more, and that creates a value proposition. And I think the last one, which is still a little way off, but we're starting to see those green shoots, is really thinking about design for disassembly or incorporating more flexibility into our buildings and spaces. And Martin touched on Keek Water Tower, but quite a unique design principle there where you've got current voids that have got inserts, I suppose, floor inserts that can go and close those voids up or remove those inserts to create voids. So it creates that flexibility for floor space for tenants that want to have multiple floors down the track. So thinking about that and incorporating that as part of the design, I think is another important element we're going to see more of.
Fantastic. Now, Michael, next, we have a youth questioner. So I'm going to get a slide up to introduce them. We're enormously lucky that we've been working with a circular enterprise entrepreneur. And if I can just get the slides up so the audience can see who they are. At 8 years old, he started a circular business with his family. They sat around the dinner table, saw some of the stats we've been seeing and said, this has to change. We need to make a business that actually creates and takes waste and turns it into a product. Fantastic. So Harry is our youth questioner. He's a 25% owner of an Australian business who we've had the privilege to have come and speak with us in the past. And so they take old bottles and they produce high-end sunglasses. So good citizens, if anyone's in the market for some sunglasses, definitely worth considering. And we're going to play Harry's question for you.
Hi, I'm Harry from Good Citizens, and we turn plastic bottles into sunglasses. This reminds people to recycle. How can you go beyond using recycled materials in buildings to using those buildings to tell a story and educate the wider community on the good things that can happen when we recycle?
Well, that's quite a question, Michael. What's some of your perspectives? And to be honest, sorry, I was just going to say it's very hard when you get asked by a 13-year-old who's been running a circularity business for 5 years. It makes all of us in the built environment step up. Over to you.
Maybe I've got to see if he's ready to step into the workplace. He'd be a good individual to have at the office, that's for sure. Look, that's a great question. I think reflecting across some of the great projects we've seen, I'd probably have to focus on what we were able to see and lucky enough to see when we travelled to Europe last year around Denmark and saw in Copenhagen. There were some amazing projects there of adaptive reuse. We saw old cement silos being converted into office towers and apartment buildings, which was quite an amazing sight and turned into a very vibrant precinct. But I think for Harry's question, probably the waste to energy facility we saw in Copenhagen, which is called Copenhill. It's quite an amazing structure that's in the industrial precinct, but it's connected to their district heating plant, so it actually processes up to 600,000 tonnes of waste per year and provides district heating for 150,000 homes a year, which is a concept we don't have in Australia. We thought it's a very great concept from a renewable energy piece, but incorporating and embracing that asset is something we haven't seen. It's got a 400-metre long ski slope that runs down the face of the building. The asset is 85 metres tall, so it's got a rock climbing wall that they go and practice for the Olympics and do the speed climbing up. It's got CrossFit areas. It's got, if you go to the top of the facility, at the top of the ski hill, there's a bar and sort of food and beverage facilities. So I thought that was really interesting in terms of not only demonstrating how renewable energy can sort of impact positively for the local economy, but how the actual, I suppose, the consumer can actually embrace those sort of facilities and turn them into activity centres. So they're a bit multi-purpose. So it's probably the best example I could come up with for that question.
Fantastic. So we've got a waste to energy facility that's also a ski field. That's a phenomenal way of doing community education. Well, thank you so much, Michael. What a privilege. I look forward to catching up with you soon, and thank you so much for bringing your insights.
All right, thanks for having me.
Great. So we're going to move to the part of the program where we answer your questions. So I'm going to invite Martin and Carolina back to the stage. And while they're coming up, we're going to go to our next youth question, which actually is a video that comes in from an Australia Future Green leader out of industry who was invited to ask their circularity question to this expert panel.
Hello, my name's Julian Lowe. I'm the ESG manager for Cromwell Property Group and the 2024 Future Green Leader of the Year. My question is, what is the greatest barrier that you see for further progress in the circular economy?
Carolina, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. I think to truly have circular buildings, we need to engage with a further stakeholders. So we can create an energy efficient building and we can create a sort of a net zero building, but a truly circular building, we need the engagement of the city. We need, for the first time, different physical and digital infrastructure that we didn't have in the past. So that's why we need everything to kind of fit right. So we need the right regulations. We need to have the infrastructure for circular materials that up to now is very difficult to find. So I think that's one of the key challenges, and it's amazing to see how the cities are starting to see a need for that approach, and they are creating these roadmaps where they are trying to engage everybody.
And maybe building on what Carolina just said, I think building and designing projects, we all know they're very capital expenditure heavy. In that sense, there are massive risks associated to adopting innovation. That's still one of the biggest barriers that we see. And reusing, for instance, reclaimed steel beams is fantastic in terms of circularity. In terms of risks, it could be a potential nightmare, and that's why I keep coming back to that point. It's an incredibly risk-averse industry, and this is something we need to overcome. We probably need new insurance mechanisms or finance mechanisms to cover those risks and to encourage people to adopt those principles at scale.
Fantastic. Well, you'll see me reverting to some of your questions here that have come through from the audience. One of the questions was, do you consider a sufficiency approach before engaging a project? So the question is, do we need a new skyscraper when there might be vacant or underused ones? Maybe, Martin, you can start with that one, noting that that's one of the principles you wanted to unpack.
Yeah, sufficiency is definitely a super high hierarchy theme. In Germany, for instance, the National Sustainability Strategy promotes sufficiency because we've basically increased the square meter per person in homes significantly over the past decades, and we potentially need to rethink that. So yes, and it is also in line with the principle of build nothing. Take existing building structures, optimize them for future uses, and in that sense it is important, and it's also going to be even more important in the future. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that we still need to have an attractive environment for investors and developers. So we need to still also consider the business cases. I think this is an important element. So despite the consistency with environment and circularity and all that, absolutely important, should be the foundation. But on top of that, we still must enable value creation in and with the built environment.
And Carolina, I might add to that question for you, because we obviously want to build, nothing first. How do we actually put principles around that? This is one of the concepts when we're looking at the fit-out tool. How do you reward someone who does nothing? How do we put metrics around doing less? Because that's fundamentally what we need to do in some of these spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I was thinking when I was thinking about the challenges, the second or perhaps the biggest challenge is about the business case, and I'm glad that Martin brought it up. And we still need to find the right way to finance our projects, and the fact that we are looking into prioritizing retrofitting as the first one is because of that. So it's about making things right. It's about actually thinking a little bit ahead, not just thinking, well, we need a building for this. It's like, well, let's look at the buildings that we have now and make it the analysis whether we need more. And just in Europe, I think the vacancy rate now is around 30%. In some cities it's higher, some cities is lower. But that means that we need to, as it was said yesterday, have the right buildings for the right people in the right place. So when we're trying to look at those indicators and measurements, we are definitely looking into that. Do we need to build more? And if it's the case, then we need to look into optimal designs.
Now, the next question is from Martin Rafaj online, another Martin. I think he's asking a question almost directly to you. He sort of says, is the construction industry ready for this disruptive circular innovation? One of the things he's saying is he's working with a company with a vision of manufacturing bio-based construction panels. One of the challenges they're having is, are people ready for it? How are we going to change the mindsets of people, probably still thinking of a conventional way of construction and materials? Now, this is your everyday, right? Sitting down with project teams, how do we do it differently? Can you describe the process for others who aren't as close to it? We have a couple of questions of this theme.
Yeah, I would say, the first question is then, what is the construction industry? So if we look at all the individual stakeholders that are involved, the supply side / the industry, designers and engineers, architects, demand side, developers, investors, I would say all of them are ready. They all have circularity high up on their agenda. In Europe, we have policy instruments like the EU Green Deal, Circular Economy Action Package, the taxonomy that are incentivizing the adoption of CE. As I said, we have mandatory whole life carbon targets in certain countries. So a lot of pressure is there, and at the same time, a lot of opportunities. Still, we see a slow uptake. So we see pilot projects. Arup is involved in some of those. Others are involved. It's going step by step, but it's very slow, to be honest. The question is, how can we accelerate that? And is there a potential tipping point? I think if the pressure on carbon and whole life carbon is getting higher towards 2030, for instance, when all governments will fail to achieve their targets, I think further policy instruments will come, further financial incentives will come. This will again accelerate it into the right direction. So I think the only missing element is still the scale. It's not necessarily the knowledge. Money exists. The principles are clear. It just goes step by step. It's a slow industry.
And Carolina, you work in a number of collaboration projects through the World Green Building Council aimed at shifting mindsets. What's some of your thoughts?
Yes, I totally agree with Martin. I think when you ask the question, who is ready, I think we know how. So we are ready in that sense. I think the policies are showing us that they know how as well. Now to scale it, we need to change the mindset of the user as well. And by user is not just us, people using buildings, but also the financial sector and the insurance sector. I think there are many cities that are struggling to ask for circular buildings when they cannot be insured, or when the business case is not right, is not there. So I think that's also one of the biggest challenge that we see to actually have circular buildings at scale.
Now we have a question from Lucy Dusso online, who's asking, could we comment on some of the best opportunities for existing building in operations and emissions, noting that we have a huge number of existing buildings. And so I think you could unpack that either, there's a surprising amount of construction material that goes in existing buildings, or looking at the operational side.
Yes, the focus on existing buildings and increasing the operational energy is also still one of the policy priorities at EU level. This is a tier 1 priority. it's clear. Still, when it comes to reusing existing buildings, we have to consider that sometimes we are treating them as if we would build new buildings. So in many cases, they are stripped down to the core and the elevator shafts, and then they are built up with new building services, new facades, a new fit out. So still, we need to also take the circularity principles into consideration and bring the whole life carbon down.
Any other thoughts from your side?
Yes, probably just to expand on that, I think when we are looking at the renovation wave in Europe, and still the first priority has been about energy efficiency, to see that those buildings perform right. But Martin is totally right. We still struggle with finding the best solutions to make them more flexible. So there is a big challenge there in terms of design and in terms of thinking that we don't need or a building doesn't have a single use, right? It's not just a school building. It could be used for many other purposes in the same life cycle. So,
and Carolina, you're actually, the World Green Building's done their first view of the Circularity Playbook, but you're expanding that work now. Can you tell the audience what to expect next from the World Green Building Council?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to say that we are at the stage where we are actually supporting solutions, innovative solutions. So I mentioned the Circular Buildings Coalition, where we have 10 building projects that are looking into different spectrums. We have platforms that are looking into future trade for building materials. We have some of the products, innovative products, so looking at facades as a service or other materials as a service, which is something that is relatively new. And also the regions are kind of stepping up and saying, well, we need to look at this bottom-up approach. So what are the local solutions and how we can scale them in all over the world? So we have, for instance, South America is looking into holistic circular roadmaps for cities in the built environment. And Africa, the same. So they are looking, well, they have used circular economy principles in their economies also for decades, but now they are joining forces and creating these alliances so that we can have these examples at a city level.
Fantastic. Well, now a last question from me. What is it that you're seeing that really inspires you when you look in the built form or beyond? You know, is it some of the exciting new product spaces? Is it people's willingness to join two buildings together? You know, what is it that inspires you that we can take this change forward? I'll start with you, Carolina. What are some of the examples that you're seeing?
I think innovative models or innovative approaches. I mean, for the first time 2 years ago, I heard about facades as a service, and that was something that I couldn't think about 10 years ago. So seeing that is being deployed, that is actually a solution in many buildings, is just very inspiring to see that we can always push the boundaries in designs, in regulations, and actually, if we have the will, we can make this happen.
Fantastic. Martin?
They're pretty similar for me. So one thing, it's obviously pilot projects, so where the principles have been translated into practice. I think this is what counts at the moment and also in the future. And the other thing is emerging businesses and business models. So we have so many gaps in the current construction economy, and those gaps are step by step filled by innovative startups, scale-ups, companies, even established industries and incumbents that reinvent their business models, their products. This is also what inspires me a lot, because this is where we are really, really fast and adapt quickly to that changing context that we're in.
Fantastic. Well, that brings our session to a close. If you'll help join me by clapping to thank our wonderful panellists for their contributions. And what excites me about this session is we're seeing these principles taken up in projects and concepts around so many parts of the globe. If any of our audience would like to speak, the panellists will remain at the end to talk more about case studies or how you can access some of the guides that were received today. Thank you so much for joining us both in the room and online, and we look forward to engaging further. Thank you so much.